My engagement day became a public betrayal. I exposed my fiancé and brother, canceled the wedding, cut off family, moved out, and reclaimed my life. The happiest day of my life. I had spent weeks planning the perfect engagement party, and I was finally going to announce to the world that Kim, my girlfriend of 7 years, had said yes. It felt like everything was falling into place, until it all fell apart in the most unimaginable way. The day started perfectly. The house was full of life, with friends and family gathering to celebrate. Everyone seemed genuinely happy, or at least that's what I thought. Kim and I were surrounded by the people who mattered most to us, and I was on cloud 9, barely able to contain my excitement. I was too busy entertaining guests and soaking in the joy of the moment to notice anything unusual. I didn't catch Ron, my younger brother, acting off, or Kim excusing herself to the bathroom for longer than normal. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs, but who goes into their engagement day expecting betrayal? At one point, I realized Kim had been gone for a while. 10, maybe 15 minutes had passed, and I started to worry. It wasn't like her to disappear during something so important. My initial thought was to check the bathroom, but it was empty. That was when a weird feeling hit me, like something wasn't right. I decided to check the backyard. When I walked out there, I saw them. Ron and Kim were standing close, their faces inches apart, and then they kissed. It was like my world stopped spinning. For a few seconds, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I felt like I was watching someone else's nightmare. Then the shock wore off and anger took over. I yelled loud enough to make them pull apart instantly. They looked at me, stunned, like deer caught in headlights. They tried to play it off, stammering excuses about how it wasn't what it looked like, but it was too late. I had seen everything. Without saying another word, I stormed back inside. My head was spinning, my chest felt tight, and I was overwhelmed by so many emotions that I didn't know which one to focus on. Disgust, rage, heartbreak. It was all there, swirling inside me. They followed me inside, trying to explain, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. I stopped in the middle of the room, in front of everyone, and announced that the engagement was over. I told them all what I had just seen, how Kim had betrayed me, and how Ron, my own brother, had no loyalty to me. The room fell silent, and the looks on their faces were a mix of shock and discomfort. Kim started crying, and Ron, he tried to comfort her, as if he was the victim in all of this. That image infuriated me even more. I pointed to the door and told them both to get out. Kim protested, saying she hadn't done anything wrong, which was ridiculous considering what I had just witnessed. She then claimed she only dated me in high school because she needed a prom date and had realized over the years that she was in love with Ron, not me. Hearing her rewrite our entire history like that, as if the 7 years we spent together meant nothing, was like adding salt to an open wound. She even accused me of being controlling and too focused on work, which didn't make any sense to me. I wasn't perfect, but I had always tried to make her happy. Her words felt like a calculated attempt to justify her actions, to make me the villain in the story. The party ended in chaos. I kicked Kim and Ron out of the house, and made it clear that I wanted nothing to do with either of them. My parents tried to calm me down, but their words felt hollow, like they were more concerned about keeping the peace than supporting me. That day wasn't just the end of my engagement. It was the start of a nightmare I couldn't have predicted. That kiss in the backyard destroyed more than just my relationship with Kim. It shattered my trust, my sense of family, and my belief in the people closest to me. I went to bed that night feeling like a stranger in my own life, and little did I know the worst was yet to come. The fallout from that day hit me harder than I could have imagined. After kicking Kim and Ron out of the house, I thought I'd at least have my family's support. I mean, how could they not see how deeply I was hurt? But I was wrong, so wrong. The morning after the engagement party disaster, my parents called. At first, I thought they were checking in to make sure I was okay. Instead, they started talking about how these things happen and how I shouldn't take it so personally. My mother actually said that it was natural for Kim to fall out of love with me and find comfort in someone else. Someone else she was talking about, my brother, as if he were some random stranger and not the guy who stabbed me in the back. My father chimed in, telling me to be the bigger person. He said I needed to understand that love doesn't always make sense, and sometimes people just end up with who they're meant to be with. Meant to be with? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They weren't just excusing Kim's behavior, they were defending Ron, like his betrayal was something noble or romantic. It was beyond insulting. I tried to explain how humiliating it was to have my fiancé cheat on me with my brother, how it felt to be blindsided by people I thought I could trust, but no matter what I said, they wouldn't budge. My mom even had the audacity to say that I was too uptight and that she always thought Kim was better suited for Ron because he was more easygoing. Hearing that from my own mother was like a slap in the face. It felt like they were rewriting history, blaming me for something I didn't even know was happening. When I told them I couldn't support this relationship and that I needed time away from all of them, they acted like I was overreacting. My dad said, "You can't choose family, son," as if that was supposed to make everything better. What kind of family justifies betrayal like this? How could they sit there and expect me to be okay with it? Even some of the friends who were at the party had their own opinions. A couple of them tried to stay neutral, saying things like, "At least you found out before getting married," but most of them were disgusted by what happened. My close friends rallied around me, reminding me that what Kim and Ron did was inexcusable. That validation was the only thing keeping me from spiraling completely. Meanwhile, my parents kept pushing their narrative. They started saying things like, "You were always hard to deal with," or "Ron has always been the more approachable one." It was like they were trying to justify what he did by making me the bad guy. At one point, my mom told me I should be grateful I didn't marry Kim because it would have ended badly anyway. I couldn't believe how far they were willing to go to minimize my pain. The final straw came when my dad suggested I apologize to Ron and Kim for how I handled the situation. Apologize for what? For catching them in the act and calling them out? That was the moment I realized there was no point in trying to get through to them. They weren't going to see my side because they didn't want to. For them, it was easier to blame me than to hold Ron accountable. It was heartbreaking. I always thought family was supposed to have your back, but instead mine chose to protect the people who betrayed me. They didn't just let me down, they broke me. That was when I decided I needed to cut them out of my life, at least for a while. I couldn't keep fighting a battle where the outcome was already decided. After everything with Kim, Ron, and my parents, I hit a breaking point. I remember sitting in my now empty living room, staring at the boxes I had packed, wondering how my life had unraveled so quickly. That house, which I once thought would be the place Kim and I built a future together, now felt suffocating, haunted by memories I wanted to forget. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I moved out within a week. One of my closest friends let me crash on their couch while I figured things out. I cannot overstate how much my friends meant to me during that time. They became my family when my own had turned their backs on me. They didn't try to sugarcoat the situation or throw meaningless platitudes my way. Instead, they helped me focus on what was ahead. Packing boxes with them became less about leaving my past behind and more about taking my first steps towards starting over. Cutting ties with my family was not easy. Every time I ignored one of my mom's calls, I felt this mix of guilt and anger. She kept leaving voicemail, saying things like, "We just want to talk or you'll regret letting this divide us." It was manipulative, and I knew it, but it still hurt. I went from being part of a tightly knit family to feeling completely alone overnight. At the same time, I knew staying in touch would only prolong the pain. One of the hardest parts of moving on was realizing how much of my identity had been tied to Kim and my family. For years, my life revolved around making Kim happy and meeting my parents' expectations. When that was gone, I didn't know who I was anymore. I threw myself into work, not because I was trying to escape, but because it was the one thing I felt I could still control. I also started traveling. I had always wanted to see more of the world, but kept putting it off because of life. Now I had no excuses. I visited places I'd only seen in pictures, and for the first time in a long time, I started to feel free. Therapy helped too. I was hesitant at first. I thought I could handle everything on my own, but talking to someone who wasn't involved in the mess gave me a new perspective. My therapist helped me see that it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't the controlling or unfun person Kim and my parents had painted me to be. It was liberating to hear someone validate what I already knew deep down. Social media was another hurdle. Seeing photos of Kim and Ron pop up in mutual friends' posts felt like a punch to the gut. I ended up unfollowing a lot of people, not because I was angry with them, but because I needed to protect my peace. Eventually, I found myself caring less and less about what they were doing. I didn't want updates. I didn't need to know if they were happy or miserable. It wasn't my problem anymore. Over time, I started to rebuild. I found a new place to live, closer to the city. It was smaller, but it was mine. I redecorated it completely, making sure there wasn't a single thing that reminded me of my old life. It felt good to have a fresh start, to create a space that reflected who I was, not who I used to be with Kim. By the time a year had passed, I didn't feel like the same person. I was still healing, but I was stronger. I had goals again, dreams that didn't revolve around anyone but myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for me, and that was enough. It had been almost 2 years since I had last spoken to my family. I thought I had finally built a life where their absence no longer left a hole. Sure, I'd catch myself wondering if they missed me or if they ever regretted how they treated me, but I quickly learned to push those thoughts aside. I had moved on, or so I thought. That peace came crashing down one afternoon when my phone started ringing. It was my mom. I stared at the screen, her name glowing like some kind of ghost from my past. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't ready to hear her voice, not after everything they had said and done. But she kept calling, over and over, until it became impossible to focus on anything else. By the time the 4th hour of non-stop calls rolled around, I finally gave in and answered. Her voice on the other end was unrecognizable. She was crying, her words choked and frantic. My first instinct was confusion. Why was she calling me, and why now? Then she said it. Ron and Kim had been in a car accident. A truck had hit their car, and they were both in critical condition, in comas. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. My mind raced between conflicting emotions, shock, pity, and a lingering anger that refused to die. Despite everything they had done to me, I felt bad for them. No one deserves that. I told my mom to stay strong and that I hoped they would recover. But even as the words left my mouth, I felt detached. My mother, however, was not calling just to inform me. She passed the phone to my dad, who was much calmer but no less determined to rope me into their crisis. They didn't just want me to visit the hospital. They wanted me to meet Kim and Ron's son, their son. That was news to me. Apparently Kim had been pregnant, and the baby was now 2 months old. My dad explained that the accident had left them uncertain about Ron and Kim's chances of survival. They needed someone to step up and take care of the baby, and somehow they thought that someone should be me. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. A nephew, a baby I didn't even know existed, and now I was expected to drop everything to become his caretaker. It didn't make any sense. I asked why they were even asking me, considering how things had ended. My dad said it was because family steps up when it matters most. Family. Where was that loyalty when I needed it 2 years ago? I told him no, firmly, clearly no. I wasn't going to play the hero in a situation I had no part in creating. My parents didn't take it well. My dad called me selfish and accused me of holding on to a grudge. He said I was punishing an innocent child for things that weren't his fault. Maybe he was right about the kid, but the rest of it? No, I wasn't punishing anyone. I was protecting myself from getting dragged back into their mess. The conversation ended with more yelling than I would have liked. I hung up and immediately blocked their numbers, but I couldn't block the thoughts swirling in my head. I felt sorry for the baby. It wasn't his fault his parents were who they were, but I also couldn't see myself being part of a life that had brought me so much pain. They had chosen Ron and Kim over me, and now they wanted me to clean up the mess. No, I wasn't doing it. Part of me felt cruel for saying no, but another part knew I had done the right thing. I couldn't let them pull me back into their orbit, not when I had worked so hard to escape it. For better or worse, I had made my choice. After the phone call with my parents, I couldn't shake the tension that had settled in my chest. Every part of me knew I'd made the right decision, but it didn't make the aftermath any easier. I blocked their numbers, hoping it would put some distance between me and their demands, but it only worked for so long. They found ways to keep reaching out, new numbers, emails, even showing up unannounced at my door. One weekend when my parents arrived at my apartment, I wanted to turn them away. I almost didn't open the door, but their relentless knocking made it impossible to ignore. They came in without waiting for an invitation. The tension was palpable from the moment they stepped inside. I stayed quiet at first, letting them talk because I knew they wouldn't leave until they said their piece. They wasted no time getting to the point. They accused me of being selfish, of abandoning my family in a time of need. My mother was especially harsh, bringing up the past, saying that I had always been difficult and that my coldness now was just another example of it. She tried to guilt me by saying I was turning my back on my nephew, a helpless baby who needed someone to step up. My dad jumped in, urging me to see this as a chance to fix things with the family, to prove that I wasn't bitter or holding a grudge. Their words were a whirlwind of manipulation and guilt, but I wasn't the same person I had been 2 years ago. I stayed calm, though every fiber of my being wanted to yell back at them. I let them talk, let them throw their accusations and guilt trips my way, but when they were done, I made my position clear. I told them I wasn't refusing to help out of anger or bitterness. It wasn't about Ron or Kim anymore. It was about me. I'd spent 2 years rebuilding my life, carving out a space where I could finally breathe, finally feel free from all the pain they had put me through. Taking on the responsibility of raising my nephew, as noble as it might sound, would pull me right back into that chaos. And honestly, I didn't trust them. The way they had treated me in the past made it impossible to believe they genuinely had my best interests, or the baby's, in mind. When I pointed out that they were at my apartment arguing with me instead of being at the hospital with their son and daughter-in-law, it struck a nerve. My dad's face hardened, and my mom started crying, accusing me of being heartless. But I stood firm. I told them that while I hoped Kim and Ron recovered, I wasn't willing to involve myself in their lives, even for the sake of the baby. It wasn't fair to me, and it wasn't fair to the child, who deserved a stable environment with people who actually wanted to raise him. The argument dragged on for over an hour. By the end of it, my parents were exhausted, their frustration spilling into more desperate pleas. They insisted I think about the future, about what would happen if Kim and Ron didn't survive. I told them I had thought about it, and my answer was still no. As much as I sympathized with the baby, I wasn't the solution to their problem. Before they left, I handed them a box of chocolates I had planned to give to a friend. I told them it was for Kim and Ron, a small gesture to show that I didn't wish them harm despite everything. My parents seemed confused, almost offended, but they took the box and left without another word. When the door closed behind them, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I had faced them, stood my ground, and defended the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. It wasn't easy, and it didn't feel good in the moment, but I knew it was necessary. That night, I sat in my apartment reflecting on how far I'd come. The guilt was still there, nagging at the edges of my thoughts, but it didn't consume me like it once might have. I realized that sometimes moving forward isn't about making everyone happy. It's about making the choices that allow you to protect your peace. And for me, that meant keeping my distance, no matter how much they tried to pull me back. A few weeks after my parents' visit, I received an email from my mom. I almost deleted it without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was a long message filled with guilt-tripping and attempts to rewrite history. She spoke about how Ron and Kim had always been meant for each other, even before Kim and I got together. She claimed that their love was something I should have seen coming, and should now embrace because family is all that matters. As I read, a wave of anger and disbelief swept over me. My own mother was justifying years of betrayal as if it were some cosmic inevitability. Worse, she revealed something I had long suspected but never wanted to confront. Kim and Ron's relationship had started long before the engagement party. That kiss in the backyard wasn't the beginning. It was the culmination of a year-long affair. My mom tried to frame this as some grand love story, but all I could see was how they had lied to me over and over while pretending to be my family. That revelation hit hard, but not in the way my mother probably intended. It didn't break me. It solidified my decision to cut ties. There was no going back to people who saw my pain as an inconvenience, who twisted the truth to fit their narrative. Then, a month later, I got another call. This time, it wasn't about guilt or manipulation. Ron had passed away. After weeks in a coma, his body just couldn't take it anymore. Hearing that was complicated. I didn't cry, but I felt this strange hollowness. He was my brother, after all. Despite everything he had done, I couldn't pretend his death didn't affect me. I didn't go to the funeral. My parents begged me to come, saying it was a chance to heal as a family, but I knew better. I stayed home, letting them grieve in their own way while I dealt with my emotions privately. It wasn't closure, but it was all I could give. Not long after, I heard through mutual contacts that Kim had survived but wasn't the same. The accident left her with permanent mobility issues and memory problems. She was in rehab, trying to rebuild her life while raising their son. I felt sorry for her, but it didn't change anything for me. She wasn't my responsibility, and I had no intention of getting involved. Every so often, I'd catch myself thinking about the baby, my nephew, who had no idea about the mess he was born into. I hoped he'd grow up with better support than I ever had, but I knew I wasn't the one to provide it. My parents tried to guilt me one last time, saying I should at least visit, but I stood firm. It wasn't about resentment anymore. It was about protecting my peace. That chapter of my life is closed now. I don't think about Kim or Ron as much as I used to. They're a part of my past, a painful lesson that shaped who I am today. Do I wish things had been different? Of course. But I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away, even if it means leaving people behind. I don't know what the future holds for my family. Maybe one day I'll reconnect with them, or maybe I won't. For now, I'm focused on living my life on my terms, free from the weight of their betrayal, and honestly, that's enough for me. Sometimes, late at night when the city is quiet and the apartment feels too big for one person, I sit on the balcony with a glass of something strong and let myself remember that day. Not the kiss. That image has mercifully faded to a dull ache, but the moment I realized the people I loved most in the world had been lying to my face for over a year, the moment I understood that the life I had spent 7 years building was a house of cards someone else had been quietly pulling apart behind my back. I used to think betrayal was a single stab wound, clean, painful, but something you could cauterize and move past. What I experienced was death by 1,000 paper cuts. Every voicemail from my mother, every family first lecture from my father, every mutual friend who suddenly got quiet when I walked into a room, each one reopened the wound a little deeper. The worst part wasn't even Kim choosing Ron. The worst part was discovering that my own parents had chosen him too, and they kept choosing him, over and over, long after I was bleeding on the floor. For a long time I carried this quiet, corrosive shame. I asked myself the questions every betrayed people always ask. Was I not enough? Too serious? Too focused on the future instead of the moment? Did I miss the signs because I was arrogant or because I was simply too trusting? I replayed every fight. Every time Kim said I worked too much. Every time my mom praised Ron for being the fun one. I looked for the moment I should have known, the clue I should have caught. Therapy taught me that looking for my own failure in someone else's betrayal is just another way of trying to regain control over something that was never in my control to begin with. Their choices were about them, not about my shortcomings. Cutting contact with my family felt like amputating a limb. For months I walked around with phantom pain, expecting my phone to ring with an apology that never came, bracing for the next guilt-laden message. I kept waiting to feel free, but freedom didn't arrive with a dramatic flourish. It crept in slowly, almost shyly. One morning I realized I hadn't checked my blocked caller list in weeks. One evening I laughed, really laughed, at a friend's stupid joke and didn't immediately feel guilty for being happy while my brother was wherever he was. I stopped measuring my healing by how much I missed them and started measuring it by how often I forgot to miss them at all. The call about the accident shook me more than I expected. Not because I still loved Ron or Kim, those feelings had burned themselves out long ago, but because it forced me to confront the final ugliest question. What kind of man am I if I can look at a helpless baby, my own flesh and blood, and say, not my problem? That question kept me awake for nights. I pictured a little boy growing up without his parents, raised by grandparents who had already proven they'd choose convenience over integrity once before. I pictured him asking him, one day, why Uncle never came around, and having to explain that I walked away because his parents hurt me too badly. And then I pictured something else. Me at 35, 40, 50, still orbiting a family that never chose me back. Still performing forgiveness I don't feel, still shrinking myself to keep the peace. Still teaching that little boy, by example, that love is conditional and loyalty is negotiable. I pictured holidays where I smiled through gritted teeth while my parents toasted family like the word hadn't been weaponized against me. I pictured a lifetime of swallowing my story so theirs could stay tidy. So I said no. Not out of spite. Not even out of anger anymore. I said no because I finally understood that boundaries aren't walls to keep others out, they're doors I get to decide whether to open. I said no because the most loving thing I can do for that child is refuse to bring him into a relationship built on resentment and obligation. He deserves better than a guardian who secretly counts the cost every day. And this is the part I'm still learning to say out loud, I deserve better too. People who haven't lived through family estrangement love to quote sayings about blood being thicker than water. They conveniently forget the full version. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, meaning the bonds we choose can be stronger than the ones we're born into. My chosen family, the friends who helped me move, who answered 3 a.m. phone calls, who never once asked me to hear Ron's side, showed me what loyalty actually looks like. They became the proof that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. I won't lie and say I never wonder about my nephew. Sometimes I see a toddler in the park and feel a pang so sharp it steals my breath. I hope he's okay. I hope someone is reading him bedtime stories and kissing his scraped knees and telling him he is enough exactly as he is. I hope he never learns what it feels like to be disposable to the people who are supposed to love you most. Maybe one day, when he's older, someone will tell him the truth. And maybe, just maybe, he'll understand why his uncle stayed away. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much to let history repeat itself. As for me, I kept walking. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed of. I built a career that excites me. I learned how to cook for one without feeling pathetic. I date sometimes, slowly, carefully, marveling at how different respect feels when it's freely given instead of rationed. I laugh louder than I used to. I cry easier too, but only when something is worth crying over. I no longer flinch when someone says the word family. I just smile and think of the people who have earned the right to the title. I lost a brother, a fiancé, and the parents I thought I had. But I found something I didn't know I was missing, the unshakable knowledge that I am allowed to matter, that my pain is valid, that my boundaries are not punishments, that walking away is not the same as giving up, sometimes it's the only way to win. I will always carry scars from that day in the backyard. But scars are just stories written on skin, and this is mine. I was betrayed by almost everyone I loved, and I still chose to love myself anyway. I was told forgiveness was mandatory, and I chose peace instead. I was told blood is forever, and I built a life that proves chosen family can be enough. If you're reading this, and you're standing at your own crossroads, carrying your own betrayals, know this. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are not weak for walking away. You are not heartless for refusing to reopen wounds just because someone else finally noticed you were bleeding. You are allowed to close the door. You are allowed to change the locks. And one day, when you're ready, you are allowed to build a new home, one where no one needs a key because they would never dream of hurting you in the first place. Is the real happy ending. Not revenge. Not reunion. Just the quiet, fierce joy of knowing you chose yourself, and that it was the bravest thing you ever did.